So on December 10th, the United States seized a Venezuelan oil tanker. This is probably one of the biggest breaking stories coming out right now this week for sure, because we haven't done something like this in a while. Now, U.S. forces executed this high-profile seizure of this large oil tanker in international waters off the coast of Venezuela, which is, I would say, a significant escalation in the Trump administration's pressure campaign against Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Now, the operation, which was described by U.S. officials as a lawful enforcement of sanctions, involved armed personnel boarding the vessel via helicopter. Now, President Donald Trump announced this action and announced this mission being completed during a White House press briefing, calling it, quote, the largest tanker ever seized, and confirming the U.S. intends to retain the cargo on board, meaning the oil. Here's a clip of him saying, yes, we're going to keep the oil.
Interested in the seizure of this tanker. Well, what happens to the oil on that ship?
Well, we keep it, I guess.
Where does it go? What port does it go to?
When you have to follow the tanker, you know, you're a good newsman, just follow the tanker.
Do you know where
follow,
it was going? Was it going
follow
to
it,
China?
get a helicopter and follow the tanker.
Is it true it's going to
But we're
Cuba?
gonna, I assume we're gonna keep the oil.
Mr. President, on Fed Chair, Kevin Haskett said you were going to announce your decision within the next 2 weeks. Is that correct?
Maybe.
Are you doing your interviews with finalists?
Now, this move has drawn some pretty sharp condemnation from Venezuela, and also some people have referred to it as, quote, an act of international piracy, and has had actual impacts on global oil markets and regional tensions. Now, this is the first known physical seizure of a Venezuelan oil shipment since the U.S. started putting sanctions on the country's state-owned oil company, Petróleos de Venezuela, back in 2019. And it builds on a broader U.S. strategy that includes a massive military buildup in the Caribbean, strikes against alleged drug trafficking vessels, and renewed sanctions after a brief easing in 2022 to 2024. Now, the vessel that was raided was called the MT Skipper, which is a very large crude oil carrier with a capacity of around 2 million barrels. At the time, it was carrying approximately 1.8 million barrels of Venezuela's heavy Mary crude oil, which was loaded up on the ship at Jose Oil Terminal between December 4th and 5th of 2025, which is in the capital city of Venezuela. Now, the ship was flying a Guyana flag, but was falsely registered there. According to Guyanese officials, it had previously sailed under a Panamanian flag. And prior to this voyage, it had docked in Iran at least twice in July of 2025 and was sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury in 2022 under the name Adisa for facilitating illicit Iranian oil shipments that funded groups like Hezbollah and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, which are designated foreign terrorist organizations. Now, the seizure of this vessel took place on, like I said, December 10th of 2025 in international waters off the coast of Aruba, like northeast of Aruba, roughly 200 to 300 miles from Venezuela's coast. And the raid included U.S. forces. They had FBI agents there. They had Homeland Security investigations personnel and U.S. Coast Guard teams, as well as support from the Department of War, like the U.S. Navy. Apparently, they boarded the vessel before 6 a.m. local time with drone and helicopter footage released by Attorney General Pam Bondi showing the MH-60 Seahawk helicopters hovering low as special forces, including about 10 Marines and 10 Coast Guard members, rappelling onto the deck with their weapons drawn. Now, apparently, there was no internal resistance on the ship that was reported, and there were no casualties or injuries reported either. Which I would imagine if this oil tanker didn't have any like military personnel on it, they're probably just gonna be like, whoa, hey, we're chill. We're chill here, guys. We're not trying to cause any problems. Now, a federal seizure warrant was issued by a U.S. judge about 2 weeks prior to this incident based on the tanker's history of violating sanctions rather than direct ties to Maduro's government. Now, prosecutors agree that the vessel was part of a, quote, ghost fleet, which is a network of like ghost ships that are used specifically to evade sanctions by disabling transponders, switching flags, and conducting ship-to-ship transfers at sea. Now, this operation was conducted safely and securely, according to the Attorney General Pam Bondi, who's been framing it as disrupting an illicit network funding terrorism. Now, the Trump administration has portrayed this seizure as a targeted strike against sanction evasion and Maduro's alleged narco-terrorism ties, and not a direct assault on Venezuela's sovereignty. Venezuela's oil sector is central to Maduro's regime, which generates revenue despite U.S. bans, and about 80% of Venezuelan exports go to China, often via shadowy intermediaries. Now, the U.S.'s goal is to choke out these flows with the president saying that the oil will be kept as leverage. Now, this seizure of this vessel is just the latest thing that's followed the 22 plus U.S. strikes since September 2025 on boats that were accused of trafficking drugs linked to Venezuelan forces, which has resulted in the deaths of at least 87 people so far, estimates say. The U.S. has 15,000 troops deployed to the region, including the USS Gerald Ford Carrier Strike Group and other assets in the Caribbean as well, which is the largest regional buildup in a very long time, probably in decades. Now, the president's also hinted at further actions, including potential land operations or seizing oil fields, though a lot of aides note that he's being cautious about full regime change. Now, as a result of this seizure, oil prices briefly spiked, with Brent crude up 0.4% to $62.21 a barrel due to supply disruption fears. But then it settled quickly as cargo represents less than 2 days of demand globally. Now, as far as like who did what role on the seizure, the FBI led the seizure warrant execution. Homeland Security investigations investigated the sanctions violations. The U.S. Coast Guard provided maritime boarding teams and primary operational support. The Department of War supplied helicopters/air support and special forces. And the U.S. Navy monitored the vessel with potential escort post-seizure. Now, so far, the Venezuelan response to this has been that Maduro's government issued a fiery statement via the foreign ministry calling the seizure a, quote, brazen robbery and a, quote, act of international piracy aimed at plundering Venezuela's resources. They also vowed to pursue legal action in international forums and rally domestic support, with Maduro telling crowds in Caracas that the country is, quote, prepared to break the teeth of the North American empire. Now, no direct military retaliation has occurred, but tensions are obviously high. And Maduro did not address it in a speech on December 10th, but later saying, don't worry, be happy on stage during some protests. Now, the country of Guyana has tried to distance itself from this, confirming that the flag was illegal. Cuba has not publicly commented on it. China, the primary buyer of Venezuelan oil, is now facing indirect pressure from this because they import a lot of Venezuelan oil because that's how they get around the sanctions. And interestingly enough, Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado was given the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, this could potentially accelerate the collapse of Venezuela's economy because oil production is already down due to sanctions and mismanagement, and it definitely disrupts a key revenue stream for the country, which could potentially lock Maduro in, like, seeking more aid from Iran or Russia. Interestingly enough, Maria Corina Machado also mentioned that there was also already Russian and Iranian agents inside of Venezuela right now, which adds an entirely new layer of complexity to this situation in the country. Here's a clip of her saying that, saying they've already been invaded.
Hello, David Rasmussen, Swedish Radio. Just today, the US seized a ship outside the coast of Venezuela. Would you welcome a US military intervention in Venezuela?
Look, some people talk about invasion in Venezuela, the threat of an invasion in Venezuela, and I answered, Venezuela has been already invaded. We have the Russian agents, we have the Iranian agents, we have terrorist groups such as Hezbollah, Hamas, operating freely in accordance with the regime.
Now, this could escalate even more because it could draw in Venezuela's allies like Russia, Iran, China, could provoke Venezuelan naval responses. So the U.S. is preparing for like a day after scenario for regime change, although that's not their specific explicit intent. As of December 11th of 2025, the skipper is still under U.S. control with its crew detained pending investigation, and further detail on the oil's fate or crew's status are expected soon. All right, guys, that's it for the daily roll-up for today. I appreciate you watching the video from start to finish. Believe it or not, it does help support the channel if you watch a video all the way through because it tells YouTube that they need to recommend the video to more people. So I appreciate you watching the video. Thanks for watching. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you want to support the channel in other ways, you can like this video, you can leave a comment in the comment section below, or you can share this video with your friends. And as always, we will see you in the next video.